first you want to create an empty model. It's a dynamic unit, and you're basically using this to set up your camera. And next you want to add the object camera. As you can see, this is the name of the camera, which you'll be referencing in the node graph. So after you set up your camera, which you do in the manage main camera tab, so once you're in this tab, you want the camera type to be an object camera. Since it's a main menu, I don't want the camera to be moving, and I just want it to be fixed on a specific scene. So which is why I kept all the ranges to be fixed, as you can see right here. Alright, so when you go to terrain editing, under environment configuration, you're able to play around with the skybox, and I think this helps to enhance your main menu. So first you want to set up the player custom class. Alright, so under custom class, you want the layout to be the first one the player sees when they spawn, which for us is the menu. When you go to interface layout under manage UI control group, you're able to make different interfaces. You can play around with different assets to basically create some sort of backdrop for your main menu. I also have this button called Fix UI, which acts the same as the Start Game button. As you can see, the node graph logic is the same for the custom Fix UI button and the Start Game button. So when the player closes the floating interaction screen by pressing maybe escape on their keyboard, they can still enter the game by pressing Fix UI. To create custom buttons, go to the Assets tab and make asset groups for each button. As you can see, I'm calling the former variable tab name on these tab buttons, as the names can be changed later in the UI control group. You can also make different button styles for the state the button is in, such as if it's being hovered, pressed, selected, and the default state. So this is the formal variable management. Go to styles and select the custom assets you made. So you could pick one for every state, like if it's being hovered, pressed, selected. Okay, so an easy way to show that it's being hovered is just to give a zoom factor of 1.1. You also want to set another style to be just empty. Okay, so once you go to functions, you can look at the different tabs. Tabs are useful for controlling the page container visibility. You just remember to set the states for every container you have. So these are the tabs, and as you can see, this is where the formal variable configuration will come in. The empty tab only shows the inherent container, which is just the title page. An easy way to give a text like a 3D effect is just to make a duplicate and just offset this slightly and make one of the colors a little darker. You can also just check the image library to find different assets you could use as decoration. So there's different dividers you could put. Since the first tab is going to be empty, I like to hide it behind the different buttons, like the start game we have right here, so that there's no noticeable gap. Here's the node graph logic. When the stage entity is first created, so to check that, we'd run it through a double branch, query the stage entity's GUID and check that's equal to the entity being created. And then we start a timer for 2 seconds. This is to give the player time to load in before we show the main menu page. Then when the 2-second timer is triggered, first we check that the timer didn't respond, and then we run it to the double branch. Then we run all the player entities on the field into the list iteration loop and show every player the floating interaction page. Also remember to initialize the list data for all the lists on your floating interaction page. For us, we only have the tab, so the key is just the index, and then the list that simply is just the order you want to show the tabs in. So for us, we want to show the empty tab first, for which If you remember earlier, it's ID4. So that's the first one on the list. And then all the ones after, I just put our actual tabs. Then after showing all the players the floating interaction page, we're also setting all the player cameras to follow the camera entity we made earlier. Here's the no grab logic for the back to main menu button. What it basically does is just like it shows the main menu again and it sets the player to follow the camera entity again, and also switches the interface back to the menu one. To make toggles in the floating interaction page, you would need like a boolean variable on your player entity. For this tutorial, I'm just going to show how to make a first person toggle and a music toggle. I'm gonna go to the custom switch, look at the functions, and set the switch custom variable mapping to the boolean you just set on your player. We're going to want to do a double branch to check if it's a yes or no, and if the button is on, we are going to set it to the opposite so that it's now off. So like for music, if we're turning it on, we're just gonna set the background music to be on. Okay, so for this example, I'm gonna show how you can make a setting for the background music volume. So the progress bar over here shows the current volume, but you will need some custom variables from the player entity. So the minimum volume that you could set it to is 0, the maximum is 100, and for the default volume, I just set it to 100. Next, I'll show these buttons. So the plus button increases the volume, the minus one decreases. So the no graph logic for this is that, so when a floating interaction page is triggered, first we check that it's the right page being triggered by using this double branch. And so we get the index of the floating interaction page. And then we run it through the multiple branches, which are the different indexes that could be triggered. To check this within the bounds of the minimum and maximum volume, we're getting the custom variable of our current volume and the maximum volume. And if the current volume is less than the maximum volume, that means it'll be okay to go through this and increase the volume. You can increase by any intervals you want. So for my example, I'm just using intervals of 1. For the other button, just the same thing, but vice versa. So this other button I have just controls the container visibility of the respective page container it's in. So in-game save variables are saved on your player entity, and it's called 1_chip_1. Its data type is a structured list. So to make that, you go to Advanced Data Management and create an in-game save. Here you could just list whatever variables you want to save. Next, you want to go to Manage in-game save, select the in-game save structure, and make sure to enable the in-game save. So here's the no graph logic for when the main menu first pops up. So we want to check that the onechip1 variable list length is at least 1, since that means the player has in-game save data. So if the player does have in-game save data, then it will get the custom variable onechip1 and get the first ID since it's a list, and we'll initialize all the variables. Next, I'll show how to make a save button and an exit button. So you want to add it to like your multiple branches from earlier. And so when the save button is pressed, you're going to set the custom variable onechip1. You're going to get the variables you want to save, assemble the structure assembly list, and then set that. And it's the same thing for the exit button, except you now have a settle stage node. Thank you for watching. Unfortunately, I don't have time to do a full overview as I originally planned, since the contest deadline is in 50 minutes and I need to export the video. But I'll link the assets in the description, and I hope you still found this helpful. Let me know if you have any questions and I'll try my best to answer.